Francesca Marcelo. Background: Geometry class. First day of spring semester in 11th grade. The room was filling up, and there was one desk left open, the one right in front of me. The seconds were ticking down before the bell would ring. Somebody was going to walk in and take this seat, and I would spend the rest of the semester staring at the back of the head belonging to this particular somebody. Please, God, let it be a hot girl. The reason I cared so much about who sat in this seat was that I had just recently turned 16. 16, meaning I was finally allowed to date. I had a pretty sweet ride, a Toyota Camry, 1 year older than I was, and a girlfriend shaped hole in my heart. That's why, sitting there at my desk, I was praying that whoever would fill that seat might also happen to be, girlfriend shaped. Then in walked Francesca Marcello. Let me say that again in case you missed it. Francesca Marcello walked into the room. Yes, people, there is a God. Francesca was hot, really hot, but she wasn't queen bee, alpha female, cheerleader hot. She was art class, vegetarian, hemp jewelry hot. Unlike most girls her age, she had this aura that suggested she'd already found herself and was content with what she'd found. She was cool enough to hang out with the popular kids, but chose to merely float in and out of their circles, sometimes gracing their lunch table or weekend parties with her presence, sometimes not. As far as I knew, she'd never had a boyfriend. She just made guys nervous. Even the popular guys, the ones with cool cars manufactured in the current decade. As I said, Francesca was hot, but I was attracted to her because she was more than that. She was a mystery, an enigma, a challenge. I might not have understood pretty girls, but I did understand challenges. But I couldn't carry on a conversation longer than, "Hey, did you do that fun homework assignment yet?" To which she'd just say, fun? Winter turned into late spring. Then it was almost summer. I knew I had to make a move. But if it was so difficult to talk to her about normal things that I knew a lot about, how could I ever will myself to articulate a series of words that would ask her out and therefore risk rejection? The same people who tell you the worst thing she can do is say no will also tell you, even if she does say no, she is rejecting you only based on surface reasons. She doesn't know the real you. Surface reasons like what exactly? My personality? That I'm not funny enough, or confident enough, or interesting enough, or intelligent enough? Or do these surface reasons concern the way I look? That I am not handsome enough, or thin enough, or muscular enough, or that I have an abnormally shaped body, or that my haircut isn't expensive enough, or my clothes stylish enough? Are these the surface reasons we're talking about here? Surface or not, take away my personality and appearance, and I'm not sure what is left. I'm not sure what the real me would be apart from them. But I know one thing: there aren't a lot of girls who would date a guy with no personality or body. Surface or not, I'm of the opinion that these things do matter, at least to some degree, and therefore a rejection of them can't be trivialized. So I reject your attempts to downplay the pain of rejection, well meaning advice givers. You can't rationalize this one away. I mean, you can try. You can try to say that it's a numbers game, that you need to get X number of rejections before you finally get a yes, or that every person has a preset chemical affinity for people with other predetermined chemical characteristics. An explanation that would, in theory, at least suggest you could make a formula for it. That fate has already been determined by the inevitability of the numbers. You can try to approach it this way. I know, because believe me, I have. But this is where you run smack into the outer limits of numbers and theory and enter the domain of emotions, an irrational wasteland of dangerously unpredictable weather patterns. You can throw all the numbers at it that you want. You can shout theories all day long. You can draw graphs and make flowcharts until you run out of paper. But in the end, rejection is just pure pain, and fighting emotion with logic is like bringing a calculator to a knife fight. You're going to get stabbed in the heart, and there's nothing your precious numbers can do to protect you. Like cancer, war, and acne, the best way to avoid the pain of rejection is to take steps to stop it before it starts. That's what I was thinking about on the last day of my junior year of high school. Francesca and I had lockers on opposite ends of the same first floor hallway. After the last exam period was finished, I could see that she was cleaning out her locker, getting ready to go home for the summer, taking down photos and post it notes from her BFFs, all that. This was it. My last chance. Hey, hi. Good times in geometry, huh? Yeah. No more geometry now, though. No, I guess not. I took a deep breath and then unleashed the line that I had been rehearsing all morning. So, we should hang out sometime. Boom. I want to pause here and acknowledge how that line may have blown your mind with its sheer awesomeness. If you need to take a break before you keep reading, I'll understand. Okay, hopefully that was a long enough break. We should hang out sometime is so perfect because it's nearly impossible to say no to. That's how I first thought of it. I was looking for a way to ask out Francesca without any possibility of rejection. Let me explain why it's rejection proof. First of all, it's a statement, not a question. If you ask a girl a yes or no question like, do you want to hang out sometime? You are opening the door to rejection. But by making a statement instead of posing a question, you're just sharing an opinion. And any well mannered person knows it's rude to disagree with someone else's opinion to his or her face. For example, let's say you walk up to a girl and say, I really like Tuesdays. What's she going to say? No, I don't think so. Of course not. She has to acknowledge that you've shared an opinion. Oh, yeah. The second reason this line is so chock full of win is that it's general rather than specific. If you say, we should hang out next Thursday at 7 o'clock, all she has to do is say, oh, sorry, that's when my favorite Bravo reality show, Next Top Singing Chef Model, comes on. But by using the word sometime, you are setting such a vague and general parameter that her only way out of it is to claim she's already booked for every hour of the rest of her life, which would obviously be a lie. And if she's a liar, she's not good enough for you anyway, is she? Finally, the line sounds casual, maybe even platonic. You're not asking her to dinner and a movie, or a walk on the beach at sunset, or some other activity with a blinking neon date sign on it. You just want to hang out, like, you know, friends. And if you're just trying to be friends, it would be impolite to say no. So I threw down the line. We should hang out sometime. And Francesca was like, yeah, totally. Okay, cool. I'll give you a call. So that's what I did. Just called her out of nowhere a week later. How'd I get her number? I looked up her parents in the phone book. Totally not weird. Hey, it's Josh Sundquist. Remember me? In high school, I always opened my calls to girls this way, just to make sure. Yeah, of course. So, when are we going to hang out? Well, whenever, she said, in a surprisingly agreeable tone. How about tomorrow? All right. You ever played golf at the par 3 course in Bridgewater? No? You know about it? Yeah, I think so. Well, it's awesome. Okay. So, you want to go there? Sure. I added to clarify. With me? Sure. The next day, I washed the outside and vacuumed the inside of my 17-year-old Camry. I got one of those cardboard Christmas tree things to hang from my rear view mirror, too. New car scent, which, as it turned out, smelled disgusting. I will never, ever forget how Francesca looked when she was walking down the stairs at her house. I had just rung the bell, and I could see through the window and the front door as she appeared at the top of the staircase. She was wearing sky blue nylon surfer girl shorts with a white spaghetti strap top. The straps on the shirt crossed diagonally in the front, forming an X beneath her neck. Her short brown hair bounced with each step as she descended. She took my breath away, literally. And in the instinctive human response to not being able to breathe, I started panicking. Our date was going to be a disaster of awkward silences and nervous stuttering. There was just no way I could talk to her, not without hyperventilating at least. Just as she opened the door and stepped onto the porch, I thought of a life saving idea. Hi, she said, smiling. Hey, so I was, wondering. She raised her eyebrows while I composed my words. Do you have any, like awesome music we could listen to in the car? Booyah. Such a good idea, right? If there were any awkward pauses on the car ride, I could just drum my fingers on the steering wheel, and it would seem like I was entranced by her music instead of running low on prepared conversation topics. See, when it comes to girls, I've always believed in being prepared. You can't leave something as important as conversation up to chance. Fact. The first time I ever called a girl, at age 13, I wrote a page long list of possible conversational questions before dialing her number from the phone book. I took notes on her answers. I intended to refer back to them when we started dating once I was 16. As it turned out, by that time, she had a boyfriend, but I still had the notes. So, anyway, I asked Francesca for a CD. She was like, sure, hold on. She returned with an Annie DiFranco CD. She's my favorite. That was Francesca speaking, not me, because I had never heard of Annie DiFranco. Annie DiFranco's songs, as it turns out, are best described as guitar picking, played as background music, while Annie, an angry, dreadlocked feminist lesbian, spouts diatribes against men. The music created that perfect mood of politically charged man hating that I always go for on a first date. Ladies, if you're looking to start a date off right, you can't go wrong with Annie.
Exercise my freedom of choice. I pass their handheld
What do you
signs.
think? Asked Francesca of the music. Oh, yeah, I said neutrally. Really interesting. Par 3 golf on a municipal golf course is an ideal first date. First of all, it's free. That's key when you're 16 years old and your primary source of income is your allowance, which has never been adjusted for inflation. Things were going well for Francesca and me. I made some jokes. She laughed at least one of them. And most importantly, there were zero awkward pauses. Until the sixth hole. That's when disaster struck. To understand exactly how this date fell apart, you need to know two things. Number one, as mentioned, this was a par 3 golf course. In case you've never heard of par 3, let me inform you. It's basically extended putt putt. You could take your local mini golf course, get rid of the 10-foot tall windmill, add in a few sand traps, move the holes back a foot or two, and you're done. You've got par 3 golf. Number two, I was wearing my artificial leg, and prosthetic limbs come pre programmed out of the box to malfunction at the worst possible moments in your entire life. So I took this shot off the sixth tee, and it was perfect. It arced up into the air, pausing for a moment, suspended at its vertex, and then dropped down onto the green. It was a beautiful parabola, a perfect y equals negative x squared arc. Stopped maybe 24 inches from the hole. I got all excited and started jumping around because I figured that a display of athletic prowess of this magnitude would totally make Francesca fall desperately in love with me. Anyway, one second I was pumping my fist in celebration, and the next I was falling backward in slow motion, arms flailing behind my head. I landed on my back and glanced up to see Francesca staring at me, all deer in the headlights. I've seen the look a million times. All right, maybe not a million, but a few. Because let's face it, I've fallen down before. Fake legs aren't the easiest thing to walk with, and people never know when you're supposed to do when the one legged guy falls down. Are you allowed to laugh at him? Should you help him up? Maybe take him to therapy? Francesca did one of those half laugh, half sympathy things you do when you see a cute little baby trip and land on his diaper while he's learning to walk. Are you all, are you all right? Yeah, I think so. But I wasn't all right. I was watching my dream of an impending makeout session vanish into thin air. And not only were my dreams vanishing, my nightmares were coming true. My disability was going to ruin my chances with Francesca. I stood up and brushed off the grass clippings, telling myself things couldn't possibly get worse. And that's when things got worse. I looked down and discovered that the foot on my artificial leg was turned backward, like it was literally facing the opposite direction of my real foot. I glanced at Francesca. She wasn't laughing anymore. The awkwardness level was off the charts, well beyond the scale of any normal measurement of social discomfort. But at least Francesca knew I had a prosthesis. You can't imagine the horror on the faces of the other golfers as they stared at a little leg, apparently so severely fractured that the foot was now capable of rotating 180 degrees. The other golfers were undoubtedly whipping out their cell phones to call 911. Hi, 911. I have a serious golfing injury to report. A young man fell down, and when he stood up, his foot was turned backward. I don't know how it's possible either, but I'm telling you, that's how it looks from my angle. Yes, a female companion. No, based on her body language right now, I'd assume they'll never be more than just friends. It's strange to walk in the direction opposite of where one of your feet is pointing, and I imagine it looks even stranger. Still, I managed to hobble over to a tree by the side of the fairway. I started kicking the tree with my artificial leg, trying to pop the foot back into place. When I was too out of breath to continue kicking, I paused to examine my progress. None. Zero. The foot was still facing backward. I needed more leverage. I began kicking again, spinning with full roundhouse kicks so my artificial foot struck the tree at eye level. At this point, I was sure the other golfers were looking at each other and saying, "This guy has some serious anger management problems." I looked down and saw that my foot was finally pointing in the same direction as the rest of my body. That was the good news. The bad news was that I had chopped down the tree. Not literally chopped it down the way loggers do with chains, like timber. It was more like the way smaller trees look after a hurricane has come through and they're bent parallel to the ground. So, yeah, definitely left a big carbon footprint that day. Francesca, who was, in retrospect, probably something of a conservationist, and a small group of similarly minded onlookers all just stood there, jaws hanging open in silence as I walked over to my ball with both feet facing proudly forward and putted it in for a birdie. I pumped my fist and smiled like things were going great, trying to keep up appearances, keep the date alive. Even with his hole in two, though, I knew my chances with Francesca were ruined. Contortions on her face while I was destroying that young sapling had said it all. This is awkward. On the way home, we listened to Annie again. This
Finding
time I
the
connected with her anger.
will
She is
understand
so deep, this Annie DiFranco, I thought.
when
She sees the world for what it truly is, a
there's
cruel,
no
dark place
one
that chews up those who are different and
in
spits them out
the
again. I pulled into Francesca's driveway and parked my car in front of the garage. I didn't bother to turn off the idling engine. This goodbye, I expected, would not last long. Thanks for coming, I said, breaking the silence. I had fun, she said. We should hang out more this summer. I opened my mouth to say, see you later, or whatever I had planned to say before she spoke, but my voice caught when I recognized the tonality of her words. She actually sounded like she wanted to see me again. Okay, well, yeah, I'll see you soon. It was a month into the summer, and I had been coming over to Francesca's house once or twice a week to play pool in her basement. After I beat her, we'd sit on the porch swing in the backyard and talk, or I'd take her to Jess's quick lunch downtown. All of which is to say, by the time we went hiking, we were pretty skilled at talking to each other, which was good since the drive to the trailhead was longer than I remembered. About 2 hours, or two and a half Annie DiFranco CDs. Hiking down to the base of the falls is pretty easy because you're doing just that, hiking down. You park on Skyline Drive in Shenandoah National Park, and then you descend for 4 miles of switchbacks, worrying the whole time about the moment when you will be sitting on that rock, overlooking the waterfall, and you will turn your head sideways and purse your lips and close your eyes and move in for the kill. But if you close your eyes first, how will you know where exactly to move? Maybe you move in first and then close your eyes. And when do you insert your tongue into her mouth? The base of the falls was just how I remembered it from when I went there with my youth group in 8th grade. When I climbed on top of that rock and that guy told me to bring a girl back here someday, heavily wooded with trees and shrubbery and shadowed by a towering rock face, with a backyard pool sized swimming hole underneath. There was no one else there. It was like our own perfect private oasis in the forest. I had been hoping that Francesca would wear a bikini that day, but she was sporting a modest green and black one piece. Much more disappointing was that she wouldn't swim in the pool underneath the falls. It's too cold, she said. She just stood up to her ankles and watched while I jumped off a low ledge into the water, trying to splash her with irresistible fun vibes. But she didn't budge. She just smiled and said something about how this all looked like a movie, which made me realize that if this were really a movie, my character would be expected to grab her around the waist and pull her into the water. She would shriek and scream and protest, but deep down, she would love it. Then we'd splash each other and giggle like school children. And she'd start trying to dunk me, and then I would fake like I had drowned by breathing through a straw made out of bamboo. And she'd freak out and start crying, and her wrist would hang limp while she flapped her hands, and then I'd hop out of the water and surprise her, and she'd laugh, and then we'd kiss. And maybe that's what she was hoping would happen. After all, why else would she strip down to her swimsuit and stand at the edge of the water like that? I started to swim toward her so I could pull her in. But while I did so, I made the mistake of thinking. Then I stopped and treaded water. I couldn't do it. There was simply too much risk. Risk that she'd be annoyed by the cold water, risk that she would find me grabbing her around the waist inappropriate, risk that my balance, standing with one leg on the slick rocks, wouldn't be stable enough to topple her, risk that it would be awkward, risk that she didn't like me. I shook my head, wishing I were in a movie instead of in my brain. What? She asked. Nothing. I climbed out of the water and picked up my crutches. I thought about putting my shirt back on, but decided to keep it off, in the hope she would be impressed by what I imagined were the chiseled muscles of my 16-year-old chest. This, I would soon discover, was a massive tactical error, but not for the reasons you probably think. Come on, I want to show you something. We walked in our swimsuits and bare feet up the steep rooted path. At the top, we came to the rock, and again I hesitated. Not about kissing her, but about simply sitting down. What if I sat down and she didn't sit beside me? I looked at her. I looked at the rock. No, couldn't do it. Too big a risk. So I just stood there, surveying the stupid trees below and thinking how stupid it was that I couldn't even bring myself to take the risk of sitting on a stupid rock and what was wrong with my stupid brain until suddenly she sat down on the rock and looked up at me like I was supposed to join her. I smiled and bit my lower lip. What? She asked. Nothing. I set my crutches down and then sat beside her, beads of water rolling down my back. Phase one was complete. But I wasn't sure how to initiate phase two, the kiss. Maybe I could do so by telling a story of how I first came here 3 years ago. How ever since then I had thought this would be a perfect place for, a first kiss. I came to this rock a few years ago. I've always wanted to come back. Upon its telling, I realized the story was both shorter and less effective than I had hoped. It's a beautiful view, she offered. Yeah. We were silent for a while, listening to the roar of the waterfall. It was a good kind of silent, though. She breathed in slowly through her nose, taking in the scene, and then she said thoughtfully, It smells like pot up here. I had absolutely no clue what pot smelled like. Yeah, I said, sniffing. It totally does. Then we were quiet again. I decided to try another tactic for initiating phase two, the deep conversation. Let me ask you something, I said. Okay. Why do you think adults give up on their dreams? I don't know. But you know what I'm saying, right? It's like everyone our age wants to change the world or be famous or something, right? She shrugged. Yeah, I guess. But most adults don't do any of those things. They just live sort of normal lives. But it's like they're okay with that. It doesn't bother them. I never really thought about it that way. Why do you think that is? She was quiet for a bit. I don't know. I guess people just get busy. I guess so. What do you think? She asked. I didn't know, but I wanted to know. I wanted my life to count. I wanted my dreams to come true. Yeah, you're probably right. People get busy. She nodded. I looked out at the treetops and continued speaking with all the petty profundity that comes with knowing so much and understanding so deeply how the world works. They get busy with being married and having children and house payments, and then they're old and they missed out on their dreams. That's probably it. Good thing we're still young. Yeah. Now we figured that out. Yeah. We were both watching the water zip off the edge just below us. You could taste the mist coming off the falls. I want to change the world, I blurted out. You do? Yeah, and I'm going to do it too. How? I don't know, but I'm going to. She looked right in my eyes. I believe you, she said, seriously. We held each other's gaze. Neither of us said anything. Neither of us moved. Neither of us even blinked. I moved my head forward exactly 1 centimeter. She squinted slightly, questioningly. This is it, I thought. It's gonna happen. My first kiss. Right now. It hit me. I was wearing a swimsuit. No underwear, no shirt. If I got, excited, which seemed all but certain during my first kiss, it would be about as subtle as a circus tent going up on your next door neighbor's front lawn. And what would she think? Would she be grossed out and go home and call her friends and tell them about it? Would it be a story that followed me through the halls of my high school until graduation? Well, it's getting kind of late, I said, glancing up at the dimming afternoon sky. Her body jumped involuntarily, as if startled. Oh, I guess you're right. As we hiked all the way back up to the car, I told her about my dream to become a Paralympic ski racer someday. I had learned to ski right after I lost my leg as a kid. And while I was still on chemotherapy, I met a former coach of the U.S. Paralympic team who told me I had great potential. Ever since then, ever since that day, I had wanted to race in the Paralympics. I asked her what her dreams were, and she said she didn't have any. I told her she should get some. I guess you're right, said Francesca. Hiking against gravity was significantly slower than hiking with it, as it turned out. The sun set and the trail turned dark under the canopy of a dense pine forest. Interesting, I thought, since we hadn't walked through any dense pine forest on the way down. I think we lost the trail, I said. We examined the bed of pine needles under our feet. There was indeed no trail. This is like something out of a horror movie, she said. I recognized this as my cue to demonstrate bravery. Yeah, pretty freaky, I agreed. Not bravely at all. Francesca and I wandered around the woods in the dark, trying to navigate by moonlight and the North Star, something I had learned how to do in Boy Scouts. By learned, I don't mean I could actually do it, but that I knew enough big words. Latitude, equator, compass, south by southwest, etc. to orienteering merit badge. So my only real strategy was to keep us walking in the same direction. As long as you go in a straight line, you'll eventually run into the end of the national park, right? I would later discover that as we wandered, Francesca's dad was calling my house every hour. At one point, Francesca's dad said to my dad on the phone, I just want you to know, even though I'm a little worried right now, there's actually no young man I'd rather have my daughter out with than your son. Oh, great. Thanks. Just what every teenaged Annie DiFranco fan wants. A guy who has the enthusiastic endorsement of her father. I'm not sure why parents always liked me when I was growing up. Maybe because I used big words and knew how to do math problems. Maybe they thought cancer made me mature for my age. Maybe because they thought I wouldn't be able to try anything on their daughters since I had a physical disability. Whatever it was, it's safe to say that if girls chose their boyfriends based on who their parents liked, I could have required resumes and headshots from girls before they would even be eligible for consideration. That's how much the parents liked me. But parental approval doesn't do much for you when you're trying to date high school chicks. In fact, it makes it harder because deep down, every teenage girl wants to bring home some biker dude with prison tattoos and a tendency to break anything that shatters. Beer bottles, windshields, young girls' hearts, just so her dad will flip out. Eventually, Francesca and I stumbled out of the pine forest onto a road. There were no cars or people in sight. This really is just like a horror movie, she said again. Being that in my family, we weren't allowed to watch PG-13 rated movies until we were 16 and R rated movies until we were adults and responsible for our own souls, I had never actually seen a horror movie. Yeah, it totally is. We followed the pavement in a randomly chosen direction for 30 minutes and eventually found the parking lot empty except for my car, which was sparkling in the moonlight thanks to a trip to the car wash that morning. About halfway through the summer, I ran into some guys I knew from school. They said they heard Francesca and I had been hanging out. I asked them where they had heard that. They said around. I took this as good news. One day she called me and we had the following conversation. What are you doing this weekend? She asked. Nothing. What are you doing? You ever heard of Pat McGee? I think so. A singer, right? I said. Uh huh. His band is having a concert up in DC. Cool. You going? I really want to, but my parents said I'm not allowed to drive to DC. Bummer. I know, huge bummer, she said. There was a pause. You will be tempted to think I am making up this next comment to amuse you. Alas, I am not. This is what I actually said. Driving in cities is one of the few things my parents let me do, I said. I've even driven to DC a few times. There was another pause, as if she was waiting for me to say something else. I filled in the silence with, So, what are you going to do instead? Nothing, I guess, she said softly. I hear people say that if they could go back in time and relive their lives, they wouldn't change a thing. Obviously, these people have never had a conversation like this one. If only I had a time machine so I could go back to my younger self, slap him in the face, take the phone, and say, I apologize for this loser's utter stupidity. Hold on a second. Then I would put my hand over the mouthpiece, turn to my 16-year-old self, and say, Dude, she wants you to give her a ride to DC. But as of this writing, time machines haven't been invented yet. So this is how the conversation ended, in the timeline of the past reality as it currently stands. My former self said he'd call her in the next day or two because we need to hang out again in the near future. And then he said goodbye and hung up. Even though I missed the chance to take her to DC for the concert, we did keep hanging out. And over the next few weeks, whenever we were playing pool in her basement, I would think how much I wanted to kiss her. What I needed was the perfect date. As far as I could tell, the main things girls were looking for in a potential boyfriend were romance and danger. Romance because they grew up wanting to live in a fairy tale, have a handsome prince rescue them and all that. Danger because, well, I'm not sure, but it seemed like girls always went for the bad boys, not the nice ones like me. So what I needed was an activity that combined these two pieces. What kind of date would have both romance and danger? One day, it just popped into my head. A picnic on top of a skyscraper. No, seriously, that was my plan. Francesca and I would lay down a blanket on the roof and eat up there in the clouds. She'd talk about how scared she was of heights, and I'd make fun of her for it. Then we'd kiss right there on the edge of a skyscraper. Romance, danger, together. The two become one. Unfortunately, we didn't have any skyscrapers in Harrisonburg, but we did have an old office building on Court Square that was probably a good 20 stories tall. That would have to be it. I tracked down the owner, James McCone, at his jewelry store next door. He was skinny and bald, perched on a plush antique chair as if it was a throne. A picnic, he said thoughtfully, bringing his knees up to his chest and hugging them. We might be able to do that. People are always trying to get up there. It's the best view in Harrisonburg, you know. I thought so. But it's dangerous, he said cautiously. Exactly. The problem is that when people go up there on the roof, their shoes get it all dirty. His ring clad fingers twitched with a thought. We don't need to wear shoes. We can go in socks. He nodded. This seemed to be good news to him, so I continued. And we'll bring a blanket to sit on. It'll protect your roof. Will you be careful? He asked. Yeah, we'll be careful. He nodded. Okay, you got it. Thanks, James, I said, slapping him a high five. Uncle James, he corrected. Right. Thanks, Uncle James. And don't forget that when you're ready to get a ring for this girl, I'm going to come to my Uncle James, of course. I called Francesca that night to tell her about the plan, hoping she'd be as excited about it as I was. How was your day? I asked. I was sitting on my parents' bed. We had two phones in our house, one in the kitchen and one in my parents' bedroom. When I wanted privacy, which is to say when I was talking to a girl I liked, I used the one in their bedroom. Okay, Francesca said over the phone. But I had to hang out with Andrew. Yikes. I just felt bad because I told him I was busy like 10 times in a row. Andrew was this other kid from school. He'd been calling Francesca that summer too. Fortunately for me, Andrew didn't know the "we should hang out some" timeline, which would have stealthily evaded the "I'm too busy" excuses she usually gave him. So how was it? I asked. Fine, I guess. Suddenly, I felt a nearly overwhelming urge to ask questions about her date with Andrew. It was like a sneeze welling up inside my nose, desperate to blow its snot load all over the phone. And like a sneeze, I knew this gossip session would feel oh so good. We would talk about whether Andrew liked her, whether she liked him, whether they make a cute couple. Achoo! Oh yeah. But I was smart enough by age 16 to steel myself against this urge with every bit of resistance power I could muster from my puritanical upbringing, because to give in to it would be to commit an unforgivable sin in Francesca's eyes. Talking about another guy she might be interested in would identify me as a friend material, a nice guy, and the only time nice guys finish first is in a race to the friend zone. So even though I was super tempted to pursue a line of conversation about Francesca's date with Andrew, I overcame my game killing instincts and changed the subject. Listen, I have something we should do together. What? A picnic? Sounds fun. A picnic on top of a building. What? On a building, like a picnic on a roof. What for? Not really the response I was hoping for. Because it will be awesome. We'll have a great view, there will be a nice breeze, and it'll be something we can say we did. She considered it. All right, I'm in. Yeah? Sure. I thought I heard her giggle. Okay, great. I've got it all set up. Sounds fun. I'm excited. Excited! This date was getting better by the minute. Maybe next week? Her voice dropped. Oh, she said. What? I'm going on vacation next week. Well, how about the week after? It's a 2-week vacation. I could the week after that, though. No, I'll be on vacation then. And the next week, I'm working at camp. And then school starts. Bummer. After we said our goodbyes and hung up, I sat silently on my parents' bed for a while. I could already feel it. It was like when you're having a cool dream, like the one where you can fly, and it's everything you ever hoped it would be. But then you realize this is impossible. So it must be a dream, and you drop out of the sky and wake up. Once school started, I would be reminded of how popular she was, and how, according to the social order of things, I wasn't supposed to be cool enough to go out with her. I would lose my nerve. The next time I saw her, or even talked to her, was indeed a month later, the night before school started. We were at a punk rock show at the local VFW post. I would roll up to these shows with spiked hair and my totally punk rock necklace, a chain of marble sized silver balls strung together that I owned solely for these occasions. I was what you'd call a poser. I wasn't even allowed to listen to the music at home. I just liked going to shows to socialize and to mosh. After one particular song, I hopped out of the mosh pit, sweaty and out of breath. And when I picked up my crutches, I found Francesca was standing right there in front of me. She said something. What? Couldn't hear. I pointed at my ears and then turned toward the door that led outside. We went out to the sidewalk. It was dark and humid, and the music pulsed on the other side of the door. We swapped summaries of our vacations, slipping back into an easy familiarity. I had not expected to see her tonight, but as we talked, the memories of the summer lit up in my mind, and the same rushing swirl of excitement and doubt flooded my awareness. There were some kids making out in the bushes nearby. Should I kiss her? I wanted to. I didn't know if she would kiss back, but if she didn't, at least then I would know. I would know she didn't like me. I jingled my car keys in my hand, trying to fill a conversational void while I worked up the nerve. No, I couldn't do it. School was starting tomorrow. Summer was over. She was popular. I was not. Time to return to reality. Well, I'm going home, I said. Got to get some sleep before first period tomorrow. Okay, she said. We hugged. Good to see you. When I got home, I went to the bathroom to brush my teeth. I looked in the mirror, but I couldn't make eye contact with myself. I had let myself down again. It was so stupid. Why couldn't I just step up and, I don't know, be brave or something? I was an embarrassment to myself, and it had to stop. It was time to take a risk. It was time to take action. I looked at myself in the mirror, set my jaw, and nodded. I got in my car and drove back to the concert. I slammed my car door and marched into the VFW post, waving my already stamped hand at the door guy as I entered. Another band was setting up on the far side of the room. Francesca was sitting against the wall talking to a friend. I was nervous, but I had to do this. Do what? I wasn't sure, but something had to happen, and it had to happen tonight. I thought you left, she said when she noticed me standing in front of her. I hoped she had not also noticed that I was shaking from all the adrenaline. I did. Francesca exchanged a look with her friend that I couldn't read. Then she looked back up at me. Can I talk to you? I asked. Sure. Outside? Okay. We walked out the door, across the sidewalk, into the parking lot without saying anything. I sat down on one of those log shaped cement parking stops. She followed suit, sitting right beside me. I just wanted to say, I began. What exactly? What was I doing here? Was I trying to kiss her? Tell her something? I squeezed the top of the cement block so she wouldn't be able to see my hand shaking. I, I just wanted to say that I'm really glad I asked you to play golf at the start of the summer. I said, perfect. That was it. All I needed to do was say that. And now she would look at me and tell me she'd never met a guy like me before, and she wanted to be with me forever, and we'd kiss. I'm so glad you did, she said. And I waited for her to say how much she liked me, how she thought about me every waking moment of every day. Yeah, I'm glad you did, she said. Why wasn't this working? Why wasn't she trying to kiss me or something? Then I realized I myself hadn't really said anything yet. I hadn't made a move. This was all so much more difficult than I had imagined it would be back when I was brushing my teeth by myself in the safety of my home. It's like, you're so cool. I thought you were this person I could never talk to. People tell me stuff like that all the time. They do? Yeah, I don't understand. You're just, I don't know. There were so many options, so many ways to say what needed to be said, and they were all there right in front of me on the tip of my tongue. But what came out was you, and it's like, wow, I can't believe I'm talking to you right now. I was drowning in a raging sea of feelings, coughing and sputtering out of desperate, disjointed words while I struggled to keep my head above water. There was a life ring floating right in front of me. All I had to do was reach out and grab it. Tell her how I felt. The problem was emotional beats rational. Fear trumps logic. Every time. Okay, Well, I guess I'll see you at school tomorrow, I said, not knowing what else to do. In the following weeks, I made the very strategic move of never calling her again. We didn't have any classes together fall of senior year, and when I would pass her in the hallway, each of us exchanging a cheery greeting that ended in an exclamation mark, I would tell myself that it didn't matter anyway. There's no way a girl like that would ever like a boy like me, right? Right? Whenever I saw her, I would think back to that night sitting in the parking lot during the concert and wonder, did I have a chance after all? Was there a possibility that maybe she liked me? Just a little bit? We were sitting there on that rock. Was she perhaps feeling a tiny flutter of hope that I would kiss her? If so, was she completely confused or even hurt at the end of the summer when I suddenly stopped calling her? Did she think that maybe I was not interested in her that way? That maybe for some reason I actually wanted to stay in the friend zone? Did she wonder if she had done something wrong? Or maybe she didn't like me after all? Maybe the golf course prosthesis disaster scared her off. Maybe she kept seeing me after that because she was simply too nice to say no. At any rate, I graduated high school a semester early so I could pursue my dream of being a ski racer. It took a lot of convincing, but eventually my parents gave me permission to move out to Colorado in December and become a full time athlete, training every day on the mountain at Winter Park and traveling around the western United States and Canada for competitions. During the ski season, I didn't think much about girls. All I thought about really was skiing. And by the time I came back to Harrisonburg at the end of the ski season, it was late March. It had been so long since I had talked to Francesca that I knew I'd never get another chance with her. Hypothesis. Subject behavior suggests Francesca may have had romantic attraction toward me, but due to my awkward behavior and fear induced reluctance to initiate mouth to mouth contact, she lost interest over time. Investigation. If I really want to find you on Facebook, no number of privacy settings is going to stop me. Creepiest sentence in this book. So it was with Francesca Marcelo. It required a lot of searching and no finding, and then searching for her friends and friends of friends from high school, finding them, then scrolling through their friends for the F's. Eventually, I found her, Francesca Marcelo. I messaged her about, hanging out sometime while we were both home for Christmas. She was game. That's how I found myself standing on her porch on December 26th, knocking on her front door and watching that stairway for her to come down, feeling much like I had a decade before when I'd come to pick her up for our golf course date. She appeared at the top of the stairway, and as she walked down, I reviewed the script I had created in my mind, the script for a conversation that would lead to all my questions being answered. But here's the problem with scripts. They work great in movies. In life, not so much. Life is too complicated. As soon as you involve other human beings and their unwieldy free wills, you can kiss your precious script goodbye. She opened the door. Her hair was cut pixie short, and her clothes were even more earthy and hempy than they were back in high school. For a second, I was not even sure it was her, but then I looked at those hazel eyes. Francesca Marcello, I said, smiling. Josh Sundquist! She wrapped her arms around my neck, and I put one forearm crutch attached hand around her waist while I kept my weight on the other crutch for balance. Come on in. She led me downstairs to the basement to play a game of pool. I hoped, I wondered, if maybe she felt the same pent up tension I did, the same lingering years old interest that kept festering, kept saying, it's possible. We could be together. We should be together. I racked the balls and pushed them into the front of the triangle before lifting it away. I let her break. I didn't want to beat her too badly. Francesca and I caught up on biographical information: college, graduation, current employment status, and the like. She asked me about my job as a motivational speaker. Bingo. That was the opening line in my script. She was following it perfectly. You remember back the first time we ever hung out? I began. When my artificial leg malfunctioned on the golf course? She smiled. Yeah, I remember. I actually tell that story in my speeches. About me? Well, it's mostly about my leg, but yeah, it's about you too. I couldn't read her expression, couldn't determine whether she was pleased or dismayed with this revelation. I pressed forward, offering, People really like it. Well, that's good, she said noncommittally. It was my turn in our game of pool, and I was lining up my shot, but I stood upright before taking it in order to pause the game while we proceeded into the dramatic climax of my script. In fact, I said, people always come up to me after my speeches and say, What happened to you and Francesca? And I'm never quite sure what to tell them. Here was the punchline. I looked straight across the pool table into her eyes to deliver it with maximum feeling. What happened to us, Francesca? I don't know, she said. What did happen to us? I froze. This was not part of the script. She was supposed to answer the question, not deflect it back to me. I wanted her to tell me exactly what went wrong, why she didn't like me, or to tell me what she did like that she did like me, and for all these years she'd been wishing our hanging out had turned into an actual relationship. But instead of giving me an answer, she had turned the question around. That caught me off guard. I didn't have the answer. That's why I had asked her, after all. I felt like we'd gone back in time 10 years, returning to that golf course. I was falling in slow motion, down, 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 landing on my back beside the tee. The foot of my artificial leg turned at an anatomically impossible angle. I looked up at her in shock and confusion and embarrassment, for a moment frozen there on the grass, unsure of what to say next. That's how I felt again, a decade later, in her basement, caught in the headlights. She had asked me a question, but I was too scared to try to answer, almost like I knew exactly what had happened to us, but was afraid to admit it to myself. I don't know, I said. She nodded slowly, almost sagely, and then she changed the subject, leaving me to wonder about that nod. Was she nodding to agree with the fact that I didn't know? As in, you certainly don't know, do you? You still don't get it, and you probably never will. Or was she nodding to show that she didn't know either? The nod was frustratingly ambiguous, but the message clear. This was a question I would somehow have to answer for myself.